Nancy, here we are, more than halfway through the games. So much has happened. So many athletes, of course, making history at these Olympic Games, and gloriously women making history left and right, which we'll talk about during the news segment. But I want to focus on the sort of a bigger picture, because this has come out of the news, Nancy. I mean, of the kind of challenges that athletes have been facing, because we've heard so much about Simone Biles, haven't we? But it's much more than that.
Yeah, I think it's even, I think right at the start of the games, it's been really interesting to, I think, see athletes talk very openly. I can't really remember an Olympics or a sporting events where athletes have spoken so openly about kind of how they're feeling. And I think it was Jade Jones, the British taekwondo athlete, who two-time Olympic champion, but lost in the opening round of this games. And she said that she just really struggled with the pressure and found it hard, like her friends and family not being in the crowd. And it was just kind of different to previous games, which she obviously had thrived off. And then Naomi Osaka as well, going out in the third round of the tennis competition, also speaking about the pressure that she'd kind of put on herself as, gold medal favourite, and she was a home favourite as well, and the Olympic cauldron and all of that. So it was kind of already before Simone Biles withdrew from a number of events. It was already quite noticeable that a lot of athletes were talking about how they were struggling in such a different environment to an Olympic Games that they're probably used to.
Yes, and I want to just mention before we bring in our guest this week that Lauren Hubbard, the first transgender woman to be competing in weightlifting, the occasion overwhelmed her, and she actually failed on all three of her lifts. So that just shows, I mean, that's a different kind of pressure for her in many ways because, of her background and the build-up to her performance here and being part of the Olympic Games. So there's lots of stories inevitably coming out of these Olympic Games. But I do want to bring in, first of all, our guest this week, who is well known to WiSP Sports listeners. She has her own show about triathlon called Try This. She was previously hosting another show about nutrition for us. She's an all-round busy woman, but I'm going to, first of all, introduce her as an Ironman, because she officially, not just a triathlete, but she's an Ironman, and that's Dr. Kirstin Lauritzen. Kirstin, thanks so much for jumping on this show for a change.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, apart from being a triathlete, an Iron woman, tell everybody what else you do in life and why we've brought you here to talk about the bigger topics of, mental health and the pressures on athletes generally.
Sure. So I work with a lot of athletes in the perspective of nutrition, as you mentioned, with the podcast that I've done here. But also I work with nutrition in the sense of sports performance. And part of what I do is I meld the worlds of sports performance and functional medicine together. And because of that, a piece of what I do is a lot of, now this is not an area where I'm an expertise, but mental health is a big portion of of the bigger picture of an athlete. It's not just the internal function. It's not just about food, but there's a layer of stress, as we've talked about, I think, in many of the episodes, and rest and all of these different pieces. So I'm just here to give a different perspective as far as the Simone Biles piece goes, and we can go from there.
Well, let's start with that, because that, again, as you mentioned, Nancy, with Naomi Osaka, we've heard in other sports how athletes are speaking out about mental health and the pressures of being an elite high-performance athlete, the mental struggles, the emotional struggles. We've already heard in these Olympic Games, not only Simone Biles and all that she's gone through with the abuse, of course, in US gymnastics, and the pressure that's been on her, some of which has been self-imposed because she's happily wearing that title of greatest of all time in the sport of gymnastics. But there are other athletes, which is why I wanted to broaden the topic today, because there are other athletes like you mentioned, Nancy Katharina Johnson-Thompson and her heptathlon dreams that were all collapsed in a heap when she had a flare-up of her ruptured Achilles. So there was Elisa Nair, the goalkeeper for the US football team. She suffered a hyperextension of the right knee and a bone contusion during the semi-final game against Canada recently. And then there's the eventer, Julia Krajewski, the German rider who made history in eventing by becoming the first woman to win gold. She just lost her father before the games. And then we heard just this week, yesterday, I believe it was, that Raven Saunders, the US shot putter, lost her mother just this week during the games. So much stress, so much pressure already. It's like a pressure cooker, Kirstin, and then something like this happens. It's an awful lot, isn't it, when you don't have the structure of the crowds that you normally do. We've had COVID restricting their training and delaying the games. They don't have their support structure. A lot of different pieces go into this pot, if you will, that's simmering called the Olympic Games.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's a couple of just different points to look at, and not just with Simone Biles, as you mentioned, but with just many of the athletes across the board. The first thing that I think it's really important just to keep in mind is that these athletes are people just like everybody else, right? I mean, they've definitely worked and sacrificed and done many different things with their lives that are quite a bit different than most people as far as spectators go, but they're still people. So there's still, I think that's the thing that always seems to be missing for me when I start reading all the comment sections and all the things about, when a lot of these news stories start coming out, is it's almost as if these athletes are put on pedestals in the sense that like they just become non-human anymore. And I think it's really important, as you mentioned, to just keep in mind, first off, it's really difficult for us to, look from the outside in. We don't really know the athlete. We don't know the person, and we don't know really what's going on. So it's hard to judge if they make a choice for themselves that is hopefully for their own health. I think we need to be aware and also open to them being careful for, themselves and for their own health. The second piece goes into that, and this is maybe specifically regarding Simone Biles, but one of the things that she kind of put out there as an explanation for why she pulled out was injury risk. And this is, I think we need to take this in the perspective of anytime we go out and do anything as an athlete, we have an injury risk. And it is part of my job to help reduce risk of injury and also to reduce risk of illness, because those are obviously, as we've just talked about, two things that pull athletes out of sport the most. But there's also another layer, especially with gymnastics. She mentioned, and actually you can see it if you watch her vaulting routine where she got lost in the air. There is a piece as far as gymnastics goes, and I was a gymnast growing up, where if you get into a situation where you lose where you are in the air, that can have very critical consequences that can lead to things like permanent injury, paralysis, and I think we've even seen a few cases of deaths from gymnasts who have messed up, while they're in the air, and then it has created very serious consequences. So there is a piece there where if you are not 100% there, then there are consequences. And I think it is important for us to recognize that, yes, we have seen gymnasts show up. We've seen tons of athletes show up for the day, regardless of how they're feeling. And in some cases they win and we glorify that choice. And then in other cases they don't win. And then we wonder why they made the choices that they did. And I think that is something I think it's a very important piece to remember. And then lastly on this, I think the stress aspect is extremely important for us to just keep in mind, because as many of us have experienced over 2020 and 2021, there's a huge load of stress that everybody has been under with the pandemic. And then for these athletes going into the games, they've described that they're almost in like a bubble, right? Where they're excluded from the rest of the world. That is Japan, because they're trying to keep people separated and not, create this huge spread. And I think that, and then not having their family, we obviously saw quite a bit leading up to the sports where women who are athletes and our moms were potentially not going to be able to bring their children that they were breastfeeding. I mean, these are layers and layers and layers of added stress on these athletes that I think is extremely important to keep in mind. Plus, as in Simone Biles' case, the trauma that the USA gymnastics team has gone through over the past several decades is extreme. And I'm not saying this is the case for Simone, but I do think that there are places where triggers and environments can be triggers for, bringing up past traumas and in the form of potentially PTSD. And we don't know what that's like, stepping out into that arena and then potentially having a wave of emotions come over you as you sort of relive some of those events. I mean, I think there's just so many layers to this that Simone doesn't really owe us an explanation really for any of it. But I think this is just an example of some of the pressures that can be on athletes that I do really think it's important that we keep in mind when we look at this situation as a whole, and then look at other athletes as well, just with at least some layers of understanding that they are people and they're going through the same things that we are in a different scenario.
Nancy, your thoughts on this?
I mean, I'm in full agreement with that. I think that it's very interesting. I think the link between mental health and physical health, where if mentally you're not feeling up for it, that could then have quite drastic consequences on you physically. I think that's kind of, the case across all sports as well. You could kind of put yourself in danger. I think it's kind of quite similar sometimes to when you see in football when someone has kind of lost their head a bit and is kind of running on emotion and then makes a dangerous tackle or something like that. You kind of see it across all sports. I also do think that there has been such the impact of lockdown. I think it's something that hasn't, might not have played an obvious stress on kind of any of us. It's something that it's been a very stressful situation, but we don't really know. A lot of countries are still in it, even here we're not fully out of it yet, and it's kind of going to be that long-term effect on what all of the stress of the pandemic has on people. And we're definitely seeing it kind of play out in sport at the moment and among athletes, and we're kind of seeing it on the biggest stage in sport at the Olympic Games. And I think it's been a shame, because I think there's been some athletes who would definitely be winning a gold medal probably in normal conditions. But then at the same time, I suppose it's kind of opened it up for other athletes who have maybe kind of prefer an environment where there aren't crowds, or maybe have, thrived off being in lockdown and having kind of more isolated training for whatever reason. Maybe they prefer that. And this has been a games where you've had more unexpected winners maybe because of that. So I think it's been interesting that we've had the Olympics now, because I think it's like I said, just it's the mental health struggles that people have had, it's kind of, for good or for bad, been a stage for them to kind of play out a bit. So it's been very interesting to see how it's gone.
Yes, I think the only athlete who will be glad there aren't any crowds at these games are the horses. Seriously. But going back to your point of, the COVID impact, of course, in terms of the athletes' preparation for a games, you then get to the games and you don't have the socialization. Say, if you have your family there, at some point you hope you're going to see them. You might be able to go and sightsee either, at the end of the games, or if you have a break, or there's at some point, you're able to socialize. And as you just mentioned, Kirstin, they've been in a bubble, rather the COVID bubble, right? Continuation of the COVID bubble, but that really would get into your head, because all they can do, and we heard this from some of the athletes during the games, is that they train or they compete and they go back to the hotel, they eat and they stay in their room. That's a really hard regime for an athlete. As you know yourself, Kirstin, you just competed in the Coeur d'Alene Ironman. You had your support crew with you all the way.
Mm-hmm. I did. I do think the support team is a very, very important piece for an athlete. I mean, I always talk about, I talk about this all the time. You need to create a good support network and team. And these athletes are not, it's not just them. There are doctors, there are massage therapists, there are coaches, there's their family and their friends. There are people that are surrounding these athletes that are in many ways critical to their success. And not having that support team there can have such an impact on your mental health. I mean, just picturing seeing my family at the end of the Ironman and seeing them throughout the Ironman, which I will say was in 108-degree heat, and it was an extreme event, which many didn't finish, and I borderline could not have finished. Having that support team there was huge for getting me through. So I think not having that layer and that support team that's supposed to be there and has probably been there for the majority of their competitions and things like that, I think that's a really difficult thing for athletes, or could be, I should say, could be.
Yeah, I do think it's a big piece of this. When you think of the competitions that they usually able to have their whole team with them. Mm-hmm. Parents come and support them, cheer them on, friends. None of that was there for them as well. Are there any other aspects to this, Kirstin, that in terms of the mental game? Because we've heard from other. I did see people tweeting that the mental strength and fortitude is what makes an Olympian. The fact that you adjust your settings. Something's going wrong. You adjust your settings. And I know that sounds trivial, but for example, they said, well, Simone Biles could have, if she was not on form and she was afraid that she was going to get injured, she could have adjusted her routine as she did for the beam. Mm-hmm. She adjusted it. Mm-hmm. So we don't know from the outside. Why didn't she then? Why didn't she go back and warm up and say to coaches, look, I'm off my game. I'm going to adjust. Let's adjust the program, which she did for the beam. So since we don't know that, I'm just wondering what your thoughts on that, because you were a gymnast yourself.
I think there's two points I'd like to make before I wrap up. Number one is I think so. First off, taking the perspective that a lot of gymnasts and a lot of these athletes who get to this level have a aspect about them that are high achievers, of course, but also potentially perfectionists. And I think there's a couple layers to this, and I can't say because I don't actually personally know Simone myself, but there may have been a piece where if I cannot perform at this level, then is it really worth me performing at all? And I say that with the perspective that another piece of this was that she was being told, and as far as what I have been gleaning from information, is that some of her routines she was going to be potentially docked points because other athletes couldn't achieve what she does in some of her routines. And I think that in and of itself, of being told that I am trying to perform at my absolute best and be the best in the world, and you are now telling me that I can't be judged based off of my best. I think there's a piece there that is I think that's something that does need to be mentioned. And I can see how an athlete could potentially make a choice not to do something if instead of changing their routine right now, whether that's right or not I don't know if we can really say, but as to your point from the flip side, that and I'd say this in the perspective of, again, bringing up, I'm not an Olympic athlete, I know that, but bringing up the perspective of my Ironman, there were choices that were made to get through the day and to adapt. And that is kind of a piece of being an athlete, is being given challenges and seeing roadblocks and things that happen, in these sometimes short events, or sometimes in the bigger scheme of things, if it's a longer race, there are always things that don't go right. And it's part of who adapts the best and makes the best choices that gets them to that finish line, and oftentimes in first, second, or third place. And I really do think that there's a glorification of being able to adapt and to make things happen and to push through and persevere. But then there's also the other side of every single Ironman race that I have done, from the halves to the fulls, where I have seen an athlete be carried or carted off of the race because they have literally collapsed and passed out at the finish line. And that is the other side, where that's not something that really should be glorified. That's a person who pushed far too hard, and is now suffering severe consequences from their choices for whatever they chose to do. And I want to create that contrast of, it's glorified to push and push and push and push until there's a severe, injury or issue that is potentially life-threatening. And again, I just want to kind of create that contrast, because I do think choices can be great, but they can also be a really potentially severe scenario, at the end.
Yes, and right. As you mentioned, you had to really make adjustments for the last Ironman that you did because of the conditions. It was I almost ended up with heat stress, so choices, right? It is, but you had to adjust. Every situation, of course, is very different. Any final points, Nancy, before Kirstin leaves us?
I think kind of what Kirstin was saying there is, it's interesting. I think that we're starting to see the end of this win at all costs mentality, which I think has just been in sport so much. I think especially gymnastics. I mean, we all know, if you've watched Athlete A and just kind of followed the abuse scandals that were going around in seemingly every country in gymnastics, it's been, I think, well, for me anyway, I think quite refreshing that a lot of athletes have decided, like, no, I'm not going to kind of participate in this win at all costs mentality anymore. Like Kirstin was saying, it was glorified. I think to some degree it is still glorified. I think more athletes kind of saying, I'm not going to participate in this anymore, I think helps eradicate that culture and make sport, I think, a more safe place and ultimately more enjoyable to watch, because you're not kind of seeing athletes take it too far to win a gold medal.
Yeah, it is a balance. It certainly is to any elite athletic endeavour, and not least of all at the Olympic Games. I'm sure there'll be more stories coming out of these games, but I think so far, Kirstin, what have been the highlights for you before we let you go? Because I know you've been keeping one eye on it.
Oh, the highlights. Oh, goodness. I love beach volleyball. Personally, I also played volleyball as well as a kid. So I love watching beach volleyball, and I've loved seeing the Canadian team actually do quite well. That's been super fun. Yeah. The other highlights for me particularly, though, have just been seeing, as you kind of actually mentioned at the beginning, we've just seen so many female athletes really standing up. They've been given a voice along with their athletic achievements. And I think we've finally seen some hopefully progress as far as the fact that, like, we love to, I think many people love to watch women's sports. I mean, I love to watch women's sports, but they're not always broadcasted. They're not always, put into, areas where we can actually see women playing sports. And I would love to see that continue, as I think especially in the Olympics, we get to see so many women in sport really competing, and we love to watch it. So I'd love to see that more coming out of after the Olympics. But yeah, those have been my highlights.
Super. Well, I know that you're going to continue training on to your next Ironman, and you'll be continuing, of course, to host the Try This podcast with us. So if anybody is interested in triathlon and nutrition and every aspect of training for a triathlon, then Kirstin covers it on the Try This podcast, which you can find wherever you listen to podcasts. So, Kirstin, thanks for taking time to hop onto this show. It's always good to catch up with you, and we'll be catching up with you, of course, next week for your show every week here at WiSP Sports. So, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back after this commercial, and we'll continue with the highlights from these Olympic Games. Well, Nancy, as I said, we're not even, we're just a bit over halfway through. It seems we've got 4 days left of these Olympic Games before we take a break. Then we move on to the Paralympic Games. Let's look at some of your highlights so far.
Well, I mean, there was a lot today, wasn't there? I think every day there's this kind of stream of stories about amazing women in sport succeeding. I really enjoyed this morning watching the women's skateboarding, actually, because skateboarding is making its Olympic debut. And unfortunately, it was in the middle of the night for us when it was live, but I managed to watch the highlights in the morning. But I just thought it was amazing. It was every skateboarder seemed to be a teenager, more or less, and they just looked like they were having the best time ever. They just all looked so happy, and they were all really supportive of each other, which I thought was amazing. So there was one time when I think it was Yososumi who eventually won gold. She she's 19, so she was the oldest among them, but she did a trick and then all the other competitors came and ran and hugged her after she did it, because it was,
I saw that. Yeah.
I think that's just incredible, because I don't really think you get that anywhere else. And I don't know, maybe if they're kind of too young to have that real competitive nature set in, or maybe that's just more kind of skateboarding's vibe. Maybe, it's a more supportive kind of happy environment than some of the other sports. But it was great for Britain, because just 13 years old, she became Team GB's youngest Olympian. She finished third with bronze. And then God, I can't remember who got silver, but I think it was also another Japanese
girl. Yes.
Yeah. Was it Okamoto? I think Masugi Okamoto of Japan. So it was just a really it was really great to watch. I just thought it was. I think it's over now, unfortunately, but it's I believe it's going to still be.
It's called the park competition because they are rather like kids playing in the park and just enjoying it. Happen to be competing for an Olympic medal, so there's a different kind of informality about it in a way, isn't there?
Yeah, and they have a street, which was last week, which is kind of more like a street setting, and then this one was park, like you said, literally like a skate park. It was. I think it was a real shame there weren't crowds, because it would have been, I think, just kind of like people just standing around a skate park watching cool tricks. Like I think the atmosphere would have been amazing. So I'm pretty sure it is staying for Paris. It definitely is safe for Paris. So I think that in 3 years' time with crowds, and then also all these 12 and 13-year-olds, they'd be kind of probably even better at that point, because they've spent another 3 years kind of honing their craft. So that should, I think that's been one of my favourite events so far.
Yeah, and of course, when you say a few years older, I mean, like the Sky Brown, the English girl, she'll be 13, 14, 15, 16. So,
16. Still so young.
It's so young, it is.
Yeah.
But good luck to them. And I'm glad they're really enjoying the Olympic camaraderie that goes with it. But that has certainly been a highlight. Have you had a time to watch some of the other new sports like surfing and sport climbing? The two, of course, the American one, the surfing, and the Carissa, and we talked about that last week. But have you watched any of these new sports?
So I didn't really get a chance to watch much surfing because it was very early in Japan, so not the best here for the time difference. But I was watching the climbing this morning because it got started, and I was watching the speed competition where they literally just
They
get to the top
just
of the ball.
run up there like
it's
like monkeys.
Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Like it is very entertaining. Like I think from what I've seen on social media, I think skateboarding has been the best received. But I think climbing has also, it's only kind of just got started. So I don't think people have had a chance to kind of watch it properly yet. But I think climbing has real potential. Like a lot of people kind of climb as a hobby. And then, like you said, it's just, it's so impressive to watch that I think it's got, definitely got potential to be a really popular sport.
Yeah, I think so too. And we're going to see some of those sports come and go as they do with each Olympic Games. Softball, of course, and baseball came back to these games because it's a very popular sport in Tokyo. But we're not going to see it in Paris. I know that the sport is hoping that it will come back in time for Los Angeles because, of course, the sport is so popular here too. But yeah, the sports that come and go, but some of those are the popular sports which will never leave the Olympic Games. And of course, one of those is athletics, track and field. And we've seen some amazing performances. We've seen the disappointments too. I mentioned Katharina Johnson-Thompson, who had a recurrence of her Achilles injury. What else has stood out for you on the track and field?
So definitely Elaine Thompson-Herah, for sure. She became the first woman to successfully defend her 100 and 200 meter titles, which she first got at Rio. 100 meters came first, and she looked very comfortable. She beat her teammate Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price. And it was really interesting, actually, because when they finished, apparently they don't actually get on that well, even though they're kind of teammates. And I think they're just so competitive, in completely stark contrast to the skateboarding. I think after the race, it was a bit frosty between them. But Elaine, so she successfully defended her 100 meter title and then went into the 200. And I think she was massively benefited by the fact that Dina Asher-Smith, the world champion in the 200 meters, had pulled her so she had done a hamstring injury about a month ago, I think 6 weeks ago, and thought she was going to have to pull out the games, and I think kind of prepared a statement saying she was going to pull out the games. And then it turned out that her injury had actually been a misdiagnosis. So they said that she had ruptured her hamstring when she'd actually torn it. So she was able to get back in time. But then in the heats of the 100, I think it was in the semi-final, she came third, didn't qualify for the final, and then revealed that she was actually still injured and was pulling out the 200. So I think her doing that really benefited Elaine Thompson, because Asher-Smith definitely could have won gold. It kind of left it open for Thompson to win. And I mean, the only other athlete in the world that has retained 100 and 200 meters in two successive games is Usain Bolt. So I think that just shows kind of the standard that Thompson-Herah is competing at. And I think she's 28, kind of late, 29, so late 20s. So she's definitely got Paris in her for sure. And in that situation, if she retains her 100 and 200 meter titles there as well, she then matches what Usain Bolt managed at Rio 2016. So yeah, she is probably one of the greatest female sprinters we've ever seen.
Yeah, extraordinary. You mentioned her age there. By contrast, 19-year-old Athing Mu actually became the first US woman to win the 800 meters since 1968. And if you watch her run, did you manage to watch Athing run?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did.
What an athlete. I mean, she's a very tall girl, but she has an amazing stride and rhythm to her run. She's wonderful to watch running.
Yeah, I think it's just 19 years old as well. That's incredible. I think there's a lot of young athletes. I think there's two Namibian runners as well. Kirstin Mboma, she finished second.
Yes.
In 200 meters, and she's only 18 years old. But she
her
was
finish. Her finish was amazing.
Yeah, she's really interesting because she and her teammate, who I can't remember the name of, but they were originally 400-meter runners. But because of the regulations that World Athletics have about testosterone levels, they moved down to the 200 because the testosterone level regulations apply for, I think it's 400 to 1500. That's why Caster Semenya wasn't running in the 800. They moved down to 200 and she got a silver medal. So, I mean, I'd love to see her running in the 400 if she's a silver medalist in the 200. So it's a shame we couldn't see that. But it's some amazing stories on track and field.
Yeah. I was very impressed with Kirstin and her amazing finish in that race. I mean, I think she surprised everybody because she's so young too. Speaking of impressive performances, not unexpectedly, it was going to be a real ding-dong of a race between McLaughlin and Mohammed in the 400-meter hurdle. Gosh, it was tight, and it all came down to that finish in the last hurdle, and for Sydney McLaughlin to just inch away, breaking the world record, her own world record, which she set in the US trials before the Games. Again, I was looking forward to that duel, and when you think about it, we're talking about athletes' age. There's a 10-year difference between those two.
Yeah, I mean, that is incredible. And I think also what I found amazing was that Mohammed's time, 51:58, was inside of the world record that McLaughlin had set earlier this year.
Yes.
So the fact that one world record went, but then McLaughlin just ran even faster. So we thought
that was possible. We thought that was possible at the trials.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't push yourself as far as you have to in a trials. You don't need to. You just need to qualify.
Yeah.
So and suspected there'd be more in her. So, yeah.
Yeah. They've been saying as well, I think Michael Johnson, he's been doing athletics coverage on the BBC, and he's been saying this track, he's speaking to athletes, this track is, it doesn't make athletes faster, but there's less kind of friction for them. So they basically are enabled to go as fast as they possibly can, which is why there's been quite a few world records already. And they were saying this can be of detriment to, say, if you're competing in the long jump or javelin or something like that, it can be of detriment because you don't want to go fast. You want to be able to control your run up. But I mean, like you said, if she was running a world record at trials, obviously she's going to go faster in the Olympic Games, and then probably helped even more by the fact that this track is
so fast,
enabling world records. It's great, and I'm just looking forward to even more athletics in the last few days of the Games.
Yeah, well, as I said, we are coming to the very final stages here of the Olympic Games. But before we go today, we have to talk about football because it's going to be an early start for me tomorrow. Another 3:45 alarm for me to watch the US play Australia in that bronze medal game. What were your thoughts? I mean, did you watch any of the US-Canada game? I mean, I know you've been dipping in and out of as much as you can, but how much of that were you able to see?
Yeah, I watched a fair bit of it. I mean, I did think... I think the US definitely could have won the match, for sure. But I think ultimately, because of their overall performance throughout the tournament, I wasn't surprised that they didn't make the final, if that makes sense. But then I think they could have beaten Canada in that individual match, because obviously it was only decided by only one goal, and it was probably a case of the US not taking their chances when they could have. I mean, I don't really know what's been the reaction over there. Is it disappointment, or were people... Because I suppose the group stage didn't go as planned. So was it kind of expected, or was it still quite a lot of disappointment?
I think, that Canada, and I know Christine Sinclair mentioned this, that she felt that US were ripe for the picking. They weren't on their best game, there hasn't been the synergy, the chemistry between them. There's a lot of conversation here about Vlatko Andonovski, the coach, whether if he can redeem himself by winning the bronze medal, then he'll give himself a little bit of breathing space. But there's the conversation about the veterans versus youth and the chemistry of there's a lot of pieces there, I think, and it produced a lackluster performance so far and disappointing through the groups, and then of course losing to Canada, which they haven't done for many years. But I'm not sure if they could have beaten Canada. I don't know if I necessarily agree with you that they could have beaten Canada, because I think Canada had got their number. I really do. I don't think that that game at any point went the way of the US. They have not been performing in the way they have been up until the games. They were off their game, quite literally. They've been off their game. Whether they can pull it together enough now to give those veterans, some of them like Carly Lloyd, well, this will be her swan song. I know she was bitterly disappointed not to be playing for a gold medal. So I think there'll be that last run at it, by some of the veterans who maybe, this will be their last championship game. So, no, I think Canada had got their number. I really do. So what will change against Australia? What do you think?
I mean, I don't know, because I think Australia will be up for it, and I think they'll be really confident. Well, they won't be as intimidated by the US because they drew against the US in the group stage.
Yes.
So I think there's that kind of, if you're playing mind games, I think maybe Australia, even though they didn't win, still kind of might have a bit of an edge because they know that they can at least hold the US. And, if it goes to a draw, goes to extra time, goes to penalties, anything can happen. I don't know. I do think ultimately the US is a stronger team, a better team than Australia. But I suppose it's kind of how each team views it and how they respond to the fact that they lost the semi-finals, because it is very disappointing, I think, to lose the semis and not get into the final. I think maybe the US, like you were saying, with they want to do it for Carly Lloyd and potentially maybe a few other players that are leaving. So maybe they'll be able to edge it. They'll be able to be a bit more fired up for it. So yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting. Really interesting match. I'm going to say probably US win it. I think.
Well, I hope it doesn't go to a penalty shootout, because we've seen that happen and it can go either way. I know, just briefly then on the gold medal game now, I mean, Canada obviously fired up thanks to Bev Priestman. She hasn't been there very long, but boy, has she made an impact, and that team must have so much confidence going into this. But I still have to say, and I think we talked about this, before the game started, who our pick was. And Sweden just seem to be on Olympic form. They are simply on Olympic form, and I doubt they can be beaten. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm backing Sweden as well. I think Sweden will win. I think they deserve to win. I think they've been the best. I think
they deserve to win. Absolutely,
yeah,
they do.
They've been the best team in the tournament, so I'd like to see them get the gold.
Yeah. All right, so gold to Sweden, Canada the silver, and then you're saying USA will actually come away with the bronze.
I think so, yeah, which is completely different to my initial predictions right at the start of the tournament. But it's been a really surprising and entertaining tournament. So I'll be sad that it's over. Yeah.
It's been huge, hasn't it? And it's so much fun to watch, despite the time difference. But fortunately, NBC over here are major rights holders, and so we've been saturated, and it's all been on demand afterwards. So it's just been constant. It's been a lot to take in. But I will be up at 3:45 a.m. tomorrow morning to watch the USA play for that bronze medal. And what are you focusing on now in those final few days? Just anything and everything?
Yeah, a bit of everything. We've got some of the boxing finals. I think Lauren Price is the British boxer. She's going in a final tomorrow. Obviously, the kind of fallout or reaction to the women's football, keeping an eye on the athletics, and I think climbing as well, because we've got Shauna Coxey is going in the climbing for Britain, and then just it seems to be quite proving to be quite popular, so keeping an eye on that. But yeah, it's been interesting because every day there's been kind of a story that hasn't really been related. It has been related to the sport that's happening, but it's been quite unexpected. So today we had Johnson Thompson withdrawing. We had like Laurel Hubbard exiting quite early, Dina Asher-Smith withdrawing, Biles withdrawing. So we've been having all these stories kind of pop out of nowhere. So it's just keeping on the ball for those stories, because you literally go and get like a drink for like 10 minutes and you come back and everything's changed.
Yes, and you find the coffee or tea wasn't good enough. You really need a strong drink.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, it's been so much fun to cover it, and yeah, part of me is looking forward to it not being so hectic, but also I'll be very sad when it's over, because it's been a lot of fun.
It's always an anticlimax, unfortunately, the coming down. And I've been talking to athletes, some of whom are WiSP ambassadors who've arrived home, and they're just coming down off that, that buzz, that Olympic buzz, which is such a high. And when it's over, it's really hard to get back, down at street level, so to speak. But I should give a shout out finally to my sport of eventing, to Julia Kirstin, who won for Germany and made history in the eventing individual there. She was the first woman to win gold, which was pretty exciting. And GB did pretty well. They won the team gold. And of course, with the rugby, we should give a shout out to our newly crowned, she wasn't an Olympic champion, but she's the newly crowned TikTok champion. That is Alona Meyer, who... I don't know if you've seen this, Nancy, but she's our rugby sevens player, and she has absolutely been setting TikTok on fire to the point where she's now good friends with J-Lo.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I have seen that she's been got pretty famous, really. I've seen really a lot of chat about her. I've seen her quite a few media outlets have covered her and her TikTok antics. So,
yes, she's been on amazing. Access Hollywood. She's been in the New York Times and Time Magazine as the TikTok queen and the Olympic TikTok queen, and so it continues too. She, if you're on TikTok, or even if you're not on TikTok, I do recommend going watching Alona Meyer, and she will be back with not just with more videos, but with also a second season of the Leo's Den podcast with her teammate Naya Tapper from USA Rugby Sevens. So do look out for that, because those two are a blast. And as I say, Lo has become something of a star. She's world famous now. Well, that about wraps it up for this week, Nancy, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Just by this time next week, the games will be over. So probably less Olympic content to discuss.
But lots of stories, I'm sure, coming out of, the fallout, as you say. There's so many side stories that are emerging from these games. So stay tuned. We'll be back. We'll bring you a lot more next week on the WiSP Sports Desk. In the meanwhile, don't forget to watch what Nancy's doing over there at Give Me Sport Women. And you can find her on social media at Nancy_Gillen, and online with Give Me Sport Women. It's what, Nancy? You never remember this, do you?
Oh, yeah. No, the Twitter handle is Give Me Sport W, but the website, I think, I don't ever remember it. I think it's givemesport.com, I think, /women's sport.
Okay.
But if you Google it, it will definitely come up.
Absolutely. And we're, of course, at wisports.com, where you find the links to the stories that we've covered here. And we're on social media at WiSP Sports. Do give us a follow and a review if you have a minute on your podcast app. Nancy and I will be back same time, same place next week with more Olympic coverage. Until then, thank you for listening.